Hey there, Dave Paulides, Canammissing Project, copyrighted edition for our video channel. I'm back in the silo. It is blistering cold outside, snow, fog. I heard the airport was closed for a while up here in northern Montana. Doesn't surprise me. It is miserable. So I'm glad I'm indoors right now. A couple of things. In the last video, I spoke about chronic wasting disease and mental illness and a missing man in Hawaii. A couple of follow-ups to that. First of all, today in the Kalispell newspaper was this article. It said, chronic wasting disease found in 2 deer in Idaho. Idaho people, pay close attention. Idaho wildlife managers say 2 deer killed in north central Idaho have tested positive for CWD. It's the first time the contagious and fatal neurological disorder has been detected in the state. The Idaho Department of Fish and Game announced Wednesday that the 2 mule deer bucks were killed near Lucille last month, and the hunters submitted the lymph nodes of the animals for testing as part of a voluntary chronic wasting disease monitoring program. Chronic wasting disease, or CWD, can also infect elk, moose, and caribou and has been confirmed in 25 states. Toby Boudreaux, chief of the Fish and Wildlife Bureau at Boise, said the 2 deer were killed about a quarter of a mile from each other. He was surprised, quoting, "He was very surprised. Idaho's first positive test came from an interior region and not from the one bordering Montana, Wyoming, or Utah, states that have known cases of the disease. CWD was documented in wild deer in Colorado in 81 and Wyoming in 85. Montana's first detected case of CWD was 2017. There can be no symptoms. That's why you got to have them all tested. Now, as I have stated right here to you many times in the videos, and that's why I'm surprised this guy doesn't know this. If deer, moose, elk have been detected right on the Idaho border as infected, and they have been, what does he think? The deer are only going to walk 30 feet into Idaho and stop? I told you before that from wherever there is a positive test for chronic wasting disease, you can expect that within 300 miles of that, there's other infected deer. So for him to say he's shocked that it's in the interior of the state, no, it's all over the state right now. Wake up. If it's in the interior, in the northern part, I can guarantee it's everywhere almost. Yeah, that's right. And they're going to have a lot more infections quickly because those 2 deer, every place they urinated, every place they dropped their saliva, it's all infected now. That's right. It's all infected. And how long is it going to last? Forever. That's right. So Idaho hunters, pay attention. Oregon and Washington hunters, it's coming your way quick. And you know what? Nobody's doing anything about it. They're all watching and monitoring and testing. Nobody's doing anything. Very, very scary outlie for this disease in our country. So when I talked about Robbie, the missing man from Hawaii, I told you about my trials and tribulations with Ben when he was in that manic stage and how they have all the energy in the world and they don't need to sleep much. And when they come down off of that, they actually want to get back to that point again because it's so euphoric. It's almost like a drug. Well, I got this letter this morning. It said, Dave, your video today is definitely preaching to the choir. My 40-year-old son is currently in a local mental health facility. When I spoke to him today, he was manic, agitated, wanting to leave. I believe they probably started him on some new meds and are observing him. No one will tell me anything. When he called me today, I insisted he sign a release of information so that people can talk to me. His therapist can't tell me anything either for some reason. Adults with mental illness need help and support from their loved ones, and how do we do that when we are flying blind? Exactly. I am terrified that he will become another Robbie Gallagher in the wind with no way to call for help and no one even to tell you what they need or how to help. I hear the pain in your voice when you talk about Ben. And I fear that the future may be waiting for me as well. I only want to help my son. Why does the system throw up these roadblocks to us doing so? So, if you're a parent in this position, you need help. And NAMI is a supportive organization for parents and for people who have mental health conditions. They are your advocate. They will answer your questions. They will help you push. But you're 100% right. How do we help our kids when we don't get the information from their therapist? The deal I made with Ben is that I'd get him out of a facility if he was ever in there, but he's going to have to sign over and give me all the information that his therapists are giving him about his condition. I'm not going to play guesswork. If you want me to be your advocate, then I'm here to help. And I have an open mind, but you got to give me the information so I'm armed with it. There's something wrong with our mental health and the way it's diagnosed, the way it's treated, and the way parents are treated in the process. I understand that there's some parents that maybe don't have the younger person's best interest at heart, but on the whole, we do. We nurtured you from you were a young child to where you are today. Maybe we didn't do the best job, but we tried. And parents never stop loving. Good parents don't. And if we are going to help, then we need to be that advocate standing right next to you, advocating for you. So sign the release and let the parents step in. I read that and I said, my gosh, I've been there, done that. It's so horrible. There need to be some new laws. There need to be some new ways to address this. And no legislator, nobody wants to touch it. It's disgusting. Every once in a while, I'll get an email or a letter. And by the way, people always ask, oh, Dave, what are you drinking? Iced tea. People ask me, Dave, I know what's causing all this, all these disappearances. It's hard for me sometimes to sit and read these because it's obvious that the person maybe watched one of our videos, maybe two, never read a book, never watched the movies. But for the people out there who haven't watched the book, haven't watched the movies, there's two. Plus there's a 2-hour show called Vanished on Amazon. And there's 11 books. So this person had it figured out, they thought. Hi Dave, your video today is definitely preaching to the... Hi Dave, if these haven't already been considered, some scenarios for those missing persons, not all of them, but many of them might be such cases. So you got to think that we have some basic knowledge on this. We've been working on it for 12 years, 13 years. But some people think we don't. Number one, the first scenario, murder where actually any of the victims who have not been found were ever lost in those locations where they were reported missing. They have never been there. They were murdered some other place, probably buried, and then reported missing in a totally different location. All the energy goes to searching for them in the location where they went missing. Actual case is different. Later, murderer might have placed items of the victim on purpose to random locations in search area to confuse the investigators. Same is possible by dumping bodies later to search an area or location. Seems to be the case where the hunter where the boots were found and later his backpack. Boots seem to be put there by somebody. Person who took off their boots don't leave them like that. I've got dozens and dozens and dozens of cases like that. Animals who drag victims to their caves, dens to consume them there, etc. Did anyone ever search nearby caves, animal dwellings? I even saw one cave in a video. Folks, search and rescue people search everywhere. And they have canines. And they have special procedures to look for animal predation. If somebody's ever attacked by a bear or mountain lion, they fight for their lives. There's dirt, bushes, everything. There's a huge turmoil there. There's blood, there's torn clothes, and there's nobody there to clean it up. If there's animal predation, it's a mess. Look online. Take your Google filters off and look at bear attacks online. You'll be stunned. So, number 3, mountain lions. When a mountain lion feeds on a deer carcass, many of the largest bones in the body will be crunched and partially or entirely consumed, including vertebrae, femurs, pelvises, skulls, and scapula. When a collection of small scavengers such as foxes, fishers, skunks, bobcats, eagles, and vultures feed on a deer carcass, the majority of the bones and skeleton will remain intact but picked clean of meat. Mountain lions kill 1 to 2 deer a week and will hide and guard large carcasses and feed on them for several days. One mountain lion can consume up to 20-30 pounds of meat in a single meal. A scientific review of records of attacks on humans on mountain lions in the United States and Canada. Obviously, no one's paying attention. Somebody's not paying attention when I talk about it. Mountain lion deaths in North America are extremely rare. And many times 100% wrong. On some of the databases, it has Jared Adadero listed as a mountain lion death, Colorado. 100% wrong. And why is it there? Because the sheriff said, oh, it's a mountain lion death. Well, then Mr. Adadero went out and took all of the evidence 4 years later that was recovered, and mountain lion experts, 4 of them, said, no, Jared wasn't killed by a mountain lion. So don't trust everything you read. In the last 100 years, 16 people have been killed in the United States. In North America by a mountain lion. 16. Counting Jared, take him off the list, 15. Like I said, it's very rare. So, and search and rescue people look for signs of predation. If there's any signs of animal predation, we don't research it. So, no, couldn't be mountain lions. Definitely seems okay. Lions can carry younger children without dragging them on the ground. They can carry quite large animals up to trees. So this is not a difficult task. Also, this explains those victims with scratches. Same as with children found larger distances from point last seen because they have been carried there. Except all of the children that were found have no injuries. Hello? Except small scratches. And no, mountain lions aren't going to give them small scratches. They're going to get torn to bits. Item number 4, falling into pits. This is probably lots of smaller holes, pits, cavities in the ground where people might have fallen, died this way, or knocked unconscious. Then snow covers, leaves covered, etc. I don't care what covered it. Mountain lion, the canines, bloodhounds are going to track right to the pit. If you fell into the pit, the dog's going to track you right there. Professional trackers are going to track you. No, not small pits. Kidnappings. People missing from cars, their belongings intact. Some individual or group kidnapping people and taking them to other locations. No. Not kidnappings like this says. Why is that? Because there's no evidence of any criminal misconduct. You might as well just make stuff up. I don't mean to be rude, but I had to read this to you because I know there's other people out there thinking the same thing. And it's because you haven't done the research on it. And it's fun to kind of nose around a new topic and throw out baseless hypothesis, but it gets frustrating because I get one of these all the time from people who really have no idea what's going on. Now, this is professional research, people. And I take it very seriously. So does the team. Next letter. Dave, I know your time is valuable, so I will get to it. First, thank you so much for your research. If you think about it, it's remarkable that no one would be talking about this had you never created Missing 411. No one. Sure, there would be some sects like Bigfoot communities, alien communities, supernatural groups, and true crime communities, like there are now. But no one has taken the time and thought this through to link all the subjects together in one big picture. It's like your entire life has led to this moment. Personally, I find it remarkable. Thank you. Second, my sincere condolences about Ben. I understand what it's like to lose a child, but I would never presume to know your pain. All I know is that it felt pretty unbearable physically on some days. Yeah, many days. The physical pain is something I don't think is easy to explain. I don't want to pretend to know anything about Ben's life, and I know you've stated he battled demons, but I'm curious if you ever heard of the links between traumatic brain injury. Yeah, I have. Ben had one or two concussions that I know about, but that had nothing to do with his illness. Next, same email. I had an experience when I was about 9 years old. I'm curious if anyone else in the 411 community has mentioned something similar. I was taking out the trash at night, and my mom and brother were in the kitchen. It was dark out, and our trash can sit right next to our back door. We had a wide driveway with brush that sat on an undeveloped lot next to us. Next to the undeveloped lot was just one house, and next to that was a street next to a large woods. We used to play in those woods often. Our neighbor was fairly new at that time. After I put the trash in the bin, I walked to the other side of the driveway. As I'm writing this, I have no idea why I walked to the other side. But I do like to stare at things because I'm inquisitive, so maybe that's why. All of a sudden, a bright blue light the size of a baseball came out of the sky, swooped right in front of me, then was gone in the blink of an eye. This was in the 80s, before any type of technology could explain this. So let me stop there. Some of the brightest minds in the UFO community have all stated, I've heard this from 30 people, that wherever you think we are on that technology scale right now, black ops, the technology that's funded by our government where we never see where the money goes, black budgets, they're working on technology that's 50 years ahead of where we are right now. And we have some of that technology right now that nobody talks about and nobody will explain. So to think in the 80s it wasn't around, it probably was. But I'll go on. I ran inside and immediately told my mom and brother. They both rolled their eyes. This was the 80s, so this was normal. It's funny because my brother is a genius, literally, and he'd always take apart our computers, as well as microelectronics, and rebuild computers with antennas. My mom always joked that when Ben, that's my brother's name too, was being quiet and hadn't been seen around the house for several hours, that he was in his room contacting Mars. Anyway, just curious if anyone in the 411 community has had a similar event. Thanks again for all you do, and I'm proud to be part of the village. If you guys have had a similar situation to this, put it on the comment section on the video, and I'm sure this man will read it. So, technology and things. 50 years ahead of what we understand to have now. Here's my example to that. I've talked to you about Commander Fravor, who is the head of the Nimitz fighter squadron that was off the coast of Mexico about 100 miles doing maneuvers with his fighter group and the Nimitz group. Many ships were out in that area. And he saw something hovering above the water, and there was turmoil below the water, like there was something below it. And he went down on it. And there's videos out there of this. And to me, he called it a tic-tac. I sat with Fravor in a room for an hour by ourselves, and I got to question him about it. Quite a meeting. But, because we were at a conference together. But when I watched that video, what it reminds me of, it's called the Tic Tac video. It reminds me of a drone. Not like your classic drone, like you're thinking of now. That's the way our menial minds go. Oh, it must look like that. No. Imagine 50 years into the future what a drone will look like. And we know how fast drones can be now, and they can be pretty fast. But then put that 50 years into the future. How fast could a drone be? Yeah. So could it be our technology? Fravor said he's never heard of it, he's never seen it, and he goes, if it is one of ours, his quote was, I want to fly it. Next email. I've been following your work for some time. First off, I want to say my condolences about your son. Your video brought me to tears, and I have known several people who have passed during COVID-19, not due to suicide, but overdoses. A family member of mine recently died from a fentanyl overdose, and I can't help but wonder if his circumstances would have been different if it had not been for the world being turned upside down in the last several years. Stop there for a second, because this one really hit a cue on me. I've talked to you about fentanyl before. The vast majority of fentanyl comes from China through Mexico, per the Drug Enforcement Administration. So if anybody thinks that China's our friend, you're nuts. They're not our friends. They're trying to kill us. Otherwise, why would they be sending fentanyl? There isn't a large business in China that doesn't operate with the support of their government. Fact. Let me talk to you about one other thing. When I was working in technology, the number one thing we had to look out for was theft of our technology and our intellectual property by China. Why doesn't our government do anything to stop this? And what I mean is hold the government of China responsible for the theft. Because we all know nothing goes on in China without their approval. Think about it. Just recently, China launched a subsonic missile that went around the world at lightning speed. And our generals made a comment, wow, we didn't know they had that. Hard to believe, folks. With as good as our spy agencies are, we didn't know they had that. That's China. Now you'd think that since we are the world powerhouse in military, that we would be spending hundreds of millions of dollars to play catch up on this. Yet on the budget that was just passed for trillions of dollars, how much went into military research on this? None. Remember, it's China's technology, and we're not going to touch that, and we're not going to go after it. And that subsonic device that they flew around can handle a nuclear warhead. It's a first strike weapon. If they get that optimized to perfection, any thought that we're the world leader is over. Now, I've told you too that China is considered an evolving nation, still evolving, even though it's one of the two top weapons people in the world for military. Yeah. And if you think about how much China controls the world through the manufacturing of various things, the thought that they're still an evolving nation is a joke. Joke. Now, why wouldn't our military want to build something and research something to compete with the competition? Of course we would. Why not? Is it because it's China? Told you before the number of Chinese spies that have been seen and caught with our political officials. I've told you before about the percentage of drugs, pharmaceuticals, and generics that are produced in China. If we have a conflict in China, your pharmaceuticals and generic drugs will evaporate away rapidly. And China will stop producing, and guess what will happen? If you are required to take those drugs or pharmaceuticals for your life, you aren't going to make it. Just the facts. And our government has allowed this to happen. Our private enterprises have allowed this to happen. We need to move all of that critical manufacturing to India and to Vietnam, ASAP, and get out of China quickly. It's going to cost us more money, but it's got to keep us solvent and alive. Now, why would China be pushing fentanyl into the United States? Leaders from China have said that the United States population and our leaders are what's called greedy. And they learned that decades ago. And they learned that money talks. And a lot of you know, if you look at the decisions that have been made in our world in the last 40 years, and if you follow that money, you're going to see why we are in the position we are today. I don't really care what party it is. Both sides of the fence are guilty of this. A couple years ago, I was in Australia, and I was blown away by the impact the Chinese have had in Australia. It's been phenomenal. Guess what? The lockdowns they're having and the control of the population they are having in Australia, after they took all of their weapons and now are controlling their population, it's very reminiscent about the way China controls their population. I really don't care what you think about this, because I am speaking the truth. Our media is corrupt. Our mainstream media is 100% corrupt. Start paying attention to who has made the big donations to media in the last 5 years, to media organizations. If there isn't a balanced delivery of the news on both sides of the fence, if the news isn't neutral, if it's not, then it's propaganda. And if our news is propaganda, then we go right back to China. Because their news is controlled. They control what they hear. It's happening here because if you look at Twitter, look at YouTube, they've started to control the message. Now, I'm not saying anything to you that's not true, because that message, if you believe it's neutral and they speak the same message on both sides of the fence, then right now you need to call some friends to pull your head out of the sand, brush it off, get the sand out of your ears, and start watching news broadcasts from the other side of the fence. So we have the news on in our office all day, and it bounces around to various channels. Why is that? Because I want to see who's lying. And at the end of the week, we have a discussion. It's pretty obvious who's lying all the time. One channel, as an example, talks about, let's just say Kyle Rittenhouse. They say he's a white supremacist, he's a killer. Both not true. He's not a white supremacist. There's no evidence anywhere he's a white supremacist. How do we know? I watched the trial from beginning to end. It was on the whole time. Did he kill some people? Yes, he did. Did he use good judgment in going to downtown? No, he didn't. But once he was there, the jury said that he defended himself and he had a right to. But yet some news agencies called him a white supremacist, and Black Lives Matter was outside the courthouse screaming and yelling. Yet this wasn't a black-white issue. Kyle Rittenhouse got involved with only white people. There wasn't 1 ounce of evidence produced he had anything to do with being a white supremacist. At the time, he was just a 17-year-old kid. Yet a couple of news agencies pushed that agenda endlessly. And it's 100% false. That's why I tell you, you are being manipulated to think a certain way. And you have to balance the message you're getting, otherwise you are going to be brainwashed. I'm very frustrated that I run into people every once in a while who I tell them something that's just like I told you, and they call me a liar. I said, I'll bet you didn't spend 10 minutes watching that trial. No, I didn't. I just know. He doesn't know anything. And I don't get mad at him because it shows how idiotic and ill-informed some people are. Some people are afraid of the facts and live on emotion. I'm the opposite. I live on facts and stay away from emotion. Facts are the only thing that's important. Okay, back to this story. I just want to share a personal story with you that happened to me when I was 16 years old. I'm 34 now. I was staying the night at a friend's house who happened to live in a new development outside Nampa, Idaho. We liked to wander around our neighborhood and explore all the new homes that were being built. Nothing seemed weird this particular evening, but as we were headed back to our house, we decided to sit on our back porch and chat. We noticed what we thought were a group of fireflies coming towards us in the distance. We continued chatting only to realize that hundreds of these balls of light had now surrounded us in our backyard. Still convinced that they were some sort of bug, my friend swatted at one as it was coming towards her. I saw with my own eyes the ball of light go right through her hand. More balls of light were approaching us, and almost like they were taunting us. They'd come right at us only to pull away, pretending like they were going to hit us. It was as if they had some sort of consciousness and they were aware that we were upset by them. At this point, we were both terrified and ran into her house. I've had other paranormal experiences I can't explain, but the fact my friend and I both witnessed these orbs was very unusual. Thanks for your work. That's pretty weird. I've never heard of that. Dave, I'm a little late on the draw on this, but here's a story I think you'll find interesting. I was in college in the mid-90s in rural northeast Georgia, which at the general time and area of all these. I'll preface them by saying that I'm stone cold sober, don't do drugs, or I don't smoke anything. First, I had gone to a friend's wedding in South Carolina. My car had been giving me fits and overheating on the regular, as it did on summer day. I found myself at this tiny roadside eatery to get some water out of a spigot to add to the radiator on my way home. I'd said a silent prayer just asking to be able to get home safely. I was literally in the middle of nowhere. The kind of place that if they had a no shirt, no shoes, no service sign, They'd have no patrons. Here I am in a suit and tie and didn't belong, and it was obvious. While I was filling up a jug with water for the radiator, I seen this old timer, kind of heavy set in a t-shirt and overalls, walk over to my car, put his hands on the front and peer inside the engine compartment. We chatted for a bit. He then tells me that the return hose to the radiator is too long and is grinding against the wheel well, which is cutting into it and causing it to leak. He tells me, when you get home and buy another hose, shorten this one up about 4 to 6 inches, you'll be fine. Don't worry, you'll get home safely. We chat a bit longer. He stayed with me long enough for me to get the radiator filled, and my car started up again. I see him walk over to his truck and pull out in front of me. He's leaving the parking lot, and keep in mind, I'm in the sticks. There's nothing but trees and kudzu on either side of the road as far as you can see. He turns left in front of me and heads down the hill. I turn left right after him, and as I'm going down the hill, he's gone. No truck, no sign of anyone. And I could see down the hill for miles, nothing. True to this word, I didn't start overheating again until I was pulling into my parking spot on campus. I figured if he was right about that, and I just experienced something supernatural. I went to an AutoZone, bought that hose, shortened it by 4 to 6 inches, and never had an issue with it again. Kind of weird. Second one, still in rural Georgia and in college. I'd gone with some friends to a mine to go fishing and just goof off at this secluded spot I love by a small river. Although I can't remember the name, although something tells me I was near the Tugaloo River, if you know the area. There were 4 of us in my car, different car, on the route we were headed to. It started getting oddly dark. Then all of a sudden something hit us, not something from this realm, like being punched in the stomach. Something just wasn't right, and I knew it. I saw the guy I knew in the right front seat react the same way I did. I asked him, "Did you just feel that?" He of course said yes. One of the guys in the back had said something wasn't right. The other guy hadn't felt anything. I immediately said, for reasons I can't explain, "We can't stop." The other 2 guys said they knew, as if we were meant to stop, something was wrong. Strangely enough, when I said, the guy next to me said, "Whatever you do, don't shut the car off." I agreed, and we had the same ominous feeling that I wouldn't be able to get the car started again. We both had that exact feeling. The third guy that also felt something had said that we needed to turn around ASAP, and something was out there. Although I didn't see anything with my open eyes, I definitely felt like something was out there hoping we'd stop. We didn't. I was able to make a U-turn of sorts and drive away. The further we got from my previously favorite fishing spot, we all started to feel better. Still, the 4th guy hadn't felt anything and was wondering why the 3 of us had freaked out. Never went back to that spot again after that. That spot used to be so nice, secluded, and peaceful. Foothills of the Smokies and a nice place to relax. Used to be. Last story. I was working at a mall, still in college, and would routinely close the store at 9 p.m. and drive home. It's about a 45-minute drive and was always peaceful and rural until this night. I'm driving along a lonely highway, no other cars around at all, which wasn't unusual. Pitch black out, no street lights, or any such thing at all. All of a sudden, the entire sky and all around me lights up in this bluish-white light. My car had one of those old-timey analog dial radios. The radio then started to tune itself from station to station. It was on in the low 90s all the way to the right, bounced back all the way to the left, and then settled back on the station I had it on, although I heard was static the entire time. I didn't stall or any such thing, just kept driving, and like a light switch, it was back to pitch black again. When I got back to campus, I'm pulling up, and a security guard that I knew said, "Hey, I thought you were working tonight." I told him I had, closed the store, and drove home. Didn't think anything of it. Keep in mind, this was in the days before cell phones and before cars had clocks in them. When I parked and went inside the dorm, I was greeted by friends who also asked if I'd worked that night and if I was okay. I said yeah, and didn't understand why people were giving me funny looks. My friends then said, "You're pale." They pulled me into their room and stood me in front of the mirror. I was really pale. I was ghostly pale, and I'm normally a very tan guy all year. Then they asked me how fast I was driving. I told them, no, there was nothing unusual. I just driving along. They showed me their clock. Thought it was a prank at first until other people came into the room to all confirm what had happened. I'll explain it like this. I was standing in my friend's dorm room at 8:45. It's a 45-minute drive home, and I close the store at 9 p.m. Basically, I got home before I'd closed the store. Now I'm really shook and pale. This wasn't just possible. They asked me what happened, and I wasn't ready to tell anyone about the strange lights, as my fear of sounding like a total loon and ending up in a psych ward at the hospital. I didn't have questions then, and I don't have answers now about what happened. I didn't feel ill, and nothing else out of the ordinary had happened that night. Though safe to say, it's not possible for me to close the store at 9, take a 45-minute drive home, and only be there at 8:45. When I get back to my own room, a couple other friends stop to ask if I'm feeling okay, and I'm still pale and a little shook and very confused. I didn't tell anyone about the time, about the lights, or what happened. Dave, I still can't explain the one. Following morning, I called my manager to ensure that I closed the store properly the night before and to make sure the deposit was good and things like that. Basically, I played dumb thinking I'd forgotten something. She told me everything was fine and that I had in fact done everything correct and closed at 9, which was telling me that I didn't leave early and also just left me with more questions than answers. And on that one, I'm stumped. Nothing like that has ever happened before or since that night. I never saw strange lights again, although I rarely took that route home again after that night. Thanks again for taking the time to read, and feel free to reach out with any further questions. You're welcome. It's like something out of an X-Files episode. Very odd. Heard similar things before. But the ones I've heard involve traveling, say, an hour's distance in a 10-minute period of time, never going backwards in time. That's a new one. Can't quite explain how that would happen. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the letters, and I am interested in all of these things that happen to you. You know what's weird is that I haven't heard from a hunter in a long time, and I know you are out there. I have heard recently from a series of rangers, some from the National Park Service. I guess the word's getting out, you can trust me. And they're starting to send things in about stories they hear from residents or people that come to the park to visit. And I know that there's a lot that the rangers hear and they never want to pass it on. How do I know? Because I've had friends tell me that they've told them things that have happened in the park. So I'm interested. So, 2 cases on the same trail we're going to talk about here. And then 1 case about a young boy that disappeared in Puyallup, Washington. And I know you'll probably correct me on the spelling. Can't know how to spell everything or how to say everything. I try. Anyhow, the boy's name was Gordon Nevins, Nevins, 16 years old. He went missing July 8th, 1908 at 11 a.m. near the fairgrounds. This area is kind of south of Seattle in Washington State, probably just a few miles from the ocean and right next to the Puyallup River. Articles at the time described Gordon as being very frail, sickly, and having, I'll quote, a nimble mind. So he sounded like he was disabled. It also stated that just before this happened, he had a bad case of pneumonia and was on the way to recovering. Now, this caught my attention for several reasons. First of all, I write about kids that have disabilities all the time, or an illness. He had both. Now, he was last seen at about 11 a.m. playing with other kids near the fairgrounds. He just disappeared. Kids were interviewed. Nobody saw anything. Nobody saw him disappear. So, again, I'm interested. I'm paying attention. So, the map. This is kind of central Puyallup. This is the river. Tacoma is up this direction. Fairgrounds right here. Boy was playing right here. Now, obviously, 100 years ago or more, 112 years ago. No freeways, no big roads, no big neighborhoods. In fact, this was described as a very woodsy area. Keep that in mind, woodsy area. So they sent out 50 men, and they covered both sides of the river, and they covered the area of the fairgrounds, and they walked around the creeks, cleared all the creeks. Nothing. Gordon was last seen wearing coveralls and a straw hat. And they brought in what they called at the time, what we would call now psychics. They called them spiritualists to join the search. Now, why is that interesting for me? Because of the headline that it made, and I'm going to show you the headline. Spiritualists looking for lost boy. Aid of spirits invoked to find Gordon. First attempt fails because vibrations were not right. Berry market brisk. Why is that important? Well, because he disappeared in the middle of berry picking season. Why is that important? Because, as you know, people in and around berry pickers disappear. But this one caught my eye. The vibrations weren't right. What does that mean? Does that mean that there is something inhibiting the psychic from finding the boy? And what would that be? There's another headline. So it said, no trace of lost child. Little Gordon Nevins has not been seen since last Wednesday morning. Other items of interest. And then they talk about other items in the city of Puyallup. Latest news, searchers for Gordon, they pronounce his name Gordon. Most of the time it's Gordon. Continue to work but are losing hope. Not seen for 4 days. Fear the child has perished. This time further efforts will be made today. Some stories said, he was found in the woods 2 weeks after he disappeared. That made some headlines. Wasn't true. Later discounted. His family searched for him for weeks. The community came back and did multiple searches during that summer. Never found. So, you have a boy with a disability. You have a boy that was sick. It's in the middle of berry season. There's water all around him. They couldn't find any tracks leaving the area. What happened? Now, why is all this important? Because, as I've told you before, if I go back in time before technology as we know it existed, then we know that something else is going on other than what could be accomplished merely today. Now, if I go back in time and I show you that, as soon as berry picking starts up and somebody disappears in the area, there's a higher frequency of disappearances, that should mean something. If I show you that a boy or a girl that's very frail and has a disability, if they disappear more commonly and are never found, that should mean something. And as many of you have said, is something monitoring us? Is something concerned with our DNA? Is something trying to analyze what went wrong in Gordon's life for him to be small and frail? And one of the newspapers said he actually looked like an 8 or 9 or maybe a 10-year-old instead of the 16 years old that he was. And it also said that he thought like an 8 or 9-year-old, meaning he was developmentally disabled. Is something monitoring us? I always think about that. So, the next two cases involve disappearances on the Pacific Crest Trail. Now, way back 12, 13 years ago, I first did this case and did the research on it. It's on a man named Michael Ficery. And Michael was a postal worker. This is the National Park Service wanted poster on Michael. And he went missing on June 15th, 2005, Yosemite National Park. He's a postman in Santa Barbara in outstanding physical condition. He rode his bike to work every day. He loved backpacking and hiking. He made a prior trip to Yellowstone National Park. Pay attention to this one, and I want it to sink in. On that trip to Yellowstone, he was hiking far in the back country. He broke his ankle. Now, friends, I know, because most of you know, that I broke my leg in Australia while Angie and I were on a back trail in a park. And it hurt like you cannot believe. And if you completely break one of your bones, you're not walking out normal. And Michael Ficery didn't walk out of Yellowstone. He crawled for miles until somebody got him help. And he was lucky to find somebody. He didn't walk, he crawled. So he evaded death in Yellowstone by luck, which is one reason why I tell you to carry a personal locator beacon. You break your leg out there in the wild and nobody's around, you're not walking out. You're going to die in the wild. Ficery made it out, and he was lucky. But he went to a place called Hetch Hetchy Reservoir in Yosemite. And that is one of the purest bodies of water you will ever see. And you can't fish in it, you can't swim in it, you can't touch it. But you can hike around it. Now, Hetch Hetchy Reservoir in Yosemite National Park is the water source for the city and county of San Francisco. And when I grew up, my grandmother lived in San Francisco. My mom and dad were raised in San Francisco. And we used to go to my grandma's house, and my friends, at the time we were living in Cupertino, they'd say, oh yeah, San Francisco sucks, this and that. And every time we went to San Francisco, you drink the water there, it's really good. And it probably is some of the best tasting big city water in the world. And that's why it comes right out of the Sierras from a very pure source. On another token, for the last 50 years, San Francisco has been saying that they're going to replace their pipes. I mean, they have giant water pipes running from the Sierras all the way to San Francisco. Because they're in a world of hurt. In a big earthquake, those pipes are going to sever, and the whole city of San Francisco is going to burn to the ground because they're not going to have any water to put out the fires. And they said, oh yeah, we're going to improve our system. They never. Anyhow, that's San Francisco. But anyhow, Ficery parks his car at a trailhead right at the dam, Shaughnessy Dam of Hetch Hetchy Reservoir. And he takes a hike around the north side, and he's about this position right here and Pacific Crest Trail, and he starts heading north towards Till Mountain. And just up a bit, they find his backpack and his supplies off trail. Now what they're saying is that they didn't find a water bottle, and they found that suspicious. And the backpack was right at the point where they were starting to get into snow. Searchers. Well, actually, other hikers found it originally and thought that somebody just dropped it there for the day. But then when searchers were eventually called, they found it, and other hikers said, oh yeah, we'd seen that days earlier. Now, he was technically missing on June 15th, 2005. Well, his permit expired on June 19th. And they say the 15th because to get around to this point and to hike up into here, it's about 6 hours. So they thought he did that on the first day, which would have been the 15th. But once his permit expired, his family called search and rescue when they didn't hear from him by June 21st. On the 22nd, they found this, which was probably a week after he was already missing. And being behind somebody a week is very hard to find. A lot of things can happen. So there is an absolute massive 5-day search and rescue. 140 square miles were searched for Michael Ficery. There's other people missing in the same area. They even brought in the Marines Mountain Division to help with this search. Multiple helicopters, K-9 teams, ground pounders. The National Park Service said that they had expended almost $400,000 in this effort. It was huge. So it's been 16 years. Michael Ficery's never been found. And people have walked this trail incessantly. They've gone off trail. They've gone all around that area. Nothing. And he was a very, very experienced backpacker. Some of the thoughts on him was, well, they thought he took his water bottle and went to get some water, fell into a creek and drowned. Yeah, it's a very simpleton answer. One problem. He also carried a topographic map with him every place he went. It wasn't in the backpack. My personal thoughts are he went up higher into altitude and something happened up there. I don't know what. But fell into a river, a creek, he would have washed into O'Shaughnessy or washed into Hetch Hetchy, I think he would have been found, but never found. Next case, more recent, April 7th, 2017, David O'Sullivan, 25 years old. He was born in Cork, Ireland, and he was last seen in a city called Idylwild, California. So David, smart kid, went to the University College in Cork, majored in media studies, and he even had a weekly radio show. The year before he disappeared, he was working in a garage and saved money to make this 5-month trip. And he was traveling from Mexico to Canada on the Pacific Crest Trail. And he had stopped on a pre-planned stop in Idylwild. David was no pushover. He had traveled to many countries, Portugal, Turkey, Scotland, Spain, London, Tunisia. He's a world traveler, not like a lot of Americans. So he knew how to work his way around different countries and how to be cautious and careful. He was also a black belt in karate, so he was no pushover. Well, on the 5th of April, he hiked into Idylwild, and he stayed at a place called the Idylwild Inn. So, here's the post office in Idylwild. Here's the Idylwild Inn. Here's the PCT trail. And right there is the Devil slide trail. Remember what I told you about Devil, missing people? Well, he mailed a package, and he went to an ATM in the city, got a small amount of money just to make it to the next stop, and he was waiting for an adapter for his Kindle. He never got it, and he left before getting it, and it went back to the manufacturer. He emailed his family from the library in Idylwild, which also is right here, in the morning hours of April 7th. And there's one trail out of town, Devil Slide Trail, and nobody ever saw him on the trail. Nobody ever saw him since. He completely vanished off the face of the earth. Now, helos, dogs, ground pounders, a massive search was put on for David. Now, smart man, world traveler, good supplies, excellent shape. It's been 4+ years and thousands of hikers. Where is he? Here's David. And that's the bulletin put out by the Murrieta Police Department, which would have been the closest police department to Idylwild. Now, David's case is interesting for a couple of reasons. The police are pretty adamant that they believe he was lost on the trail. Other people don't think he ever got to the trail. Now, there's something like a sixth sense, and we've talked about this before, that some people have, and you develop it as you get older, and you become, after you're around cultures, you understand various cultures and various things. Well, David had been in the U.S. for a while, and he knew it could be dangerous. So I don't believe that anything could have happened to him in Idylwild. There's not a lot of crime there. But there have been people missing on the Pacific Crest Trail in the past. So maybe this happened again. I don't know. It's a very strange case. His parents in Ireland are concerned, as I would be if I were them. What happened to him? They've traveled here many times trying to get some help. Nothing. So, Michael Ficery, Hetch Hetchy Reservoir, look it up. Look at the amount of granite around Hetch Hetchy Reservoir. Look at the amount of water in the area near Telltale Mountain. Remember what I told you about people disappearing in areas with lots of small lakes and things? It's a dead ringer for it. Around lots of granite, dead ringer for it. David O'Sullivan, look at the area around that Devil's Trail area, Devil's Slide Trail. Look at it. Gordon Nevins, he had all of those strange illnesses, injuries, disabilities that I look for in missing people. Yeah. So, if you can, give me a thumbs up on the video. Please post it on your social media site. It's helpful. We want to get the word out on these missing people. If you have a story when you're in the woods, and you're a hunter especially. And why do I say hunters? Because hunters are usually armed, and they're a different kind of target than somebody who's just in the woods. But if you're backpacking deep in the woods in Yosemite, Yellowstone, Kings Canyon, Sequoia National Park, Utah, Oregon, Washington, any of those areas, I want to hear about it. And also, people from Canada, I want to hear from you. Because I wrote a book just about people missing in Canada, so no. So I appreciate you being here. Let's keep in touch. The links for all the books that you can buy, don't buy the books on Amazon. You're going to pay 5 or 6 times the cost that they are on our site. Our movies are still free. And you can watch a show called Vanished I made for the History Channel. It costs you like $2 on Amazon. I don't get any of that money. But anyhow, thanks for being here, you guys. Take care.